First of all, thank you, Hugo, for having me, David, and all the sponsors. My name is Mario Trujillo, and I have been associated with the money transfer business a little bit over a decade. They asked me to come speak about M&A, and I'm happy to do that. I'm going to give you my perspective, and I'm going to give you a 2-second disclaimer, which is all the information that I have here is private. It's all information that we have gathered. It's likely to not be completely accurate, and I apologize for that up front. It's meant to be as accurate as we have it. And what I wanted to do was give you our perspective of how we've seen the industry develop over the last really 10 to 15 years, the experiences that we have had, and cover a little bit of the challenges that go associated with mergers and acquisitions or M&A. I think it's important to kind of recognize how we got here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about industry trends and have some interesting data points for you guys to review. I'm going to cover a number of the companies that have traded hands in this last 10 or 15 years. And that might surprise you because it surprised me once I sat down and started looking through my files and realized all the companies that have traded hands, new owners, et cetera, some of them more than one. So we're going to go over that. We're going to then look at the lenders, institutional investors, private equity investors, and strategic buyers. And that might also surprise you both in terms of the number, the quality of those groups, as well as the total number invested in the industry during this period, which I think is, again, pretty interesting. And then finally, I'm gonna go into sort of our typical M&A process and the thought process that we go through, some of the things that worked well, some of the things that didn't work well. I'm not spending a lot of time on either Dolex or our current businesses, because I really wanted to give you that overall perspective. So how do we get here? Well, first of all, we've had in this industry probably over 20 years of exceptional growth, driven primarily by immigration. If you look at the left side of the slide, you will find periods of high immigration, and I'm primarily focusing on Latin America and the U.S. That drove a lot of transactions, a lot of volume, and a lot of business. In the early days, 20 years ago, the industry was dominated by large players. Western Union and Telecom used to dominate Mexico, for example. Prices were very, very high at that time. The service wasn't that great. Yet that kind of evolution of the industry and those economics drove and brought a lot of new entrants. So most of the people in this room probably started their industry or their businesses in the last 10 or 20 years. Helio Guzman, whose company we bought in 2003, had been in the business about 18 years, sort of stumbled into it, which is really fascinating. When you talk about the original entrepreneurs, the Guillermo de la Viñas and some of the others here, understanding how they got into the business and what led them there is really, really fascinating. We don't have time for that today, but I encourage you to talk to them if you have an opportunity. So the new competitors then normally brought lower prices, better services, more coverage, and that's something that will continue as long as there are new technologies and new competitors into the industry. In 2001, in part as a result of 9/11, we experienced what I think, or what I've experienced to be the first really big regulation impacting this industry, the Patriot Act and other things. And we've had that with us ever since. It's getting increasingly more difficult, and it's some of the things that are helping the consolidation of the industry. So if you look at the right side of the slide, we've had the Great Recession, as many people like to call it. So 2008, 2009, and 2010, if you look at the central banks for most of the Latin countries, you will see that we experienced, after years of having positive year-over-year increases, sometimes in the double digits, we experienced 3 years of declining transactions and volume in the majority of the Latin countries. Those trends began to reverse a little bit at the end of 2010. In 2011, the countries that report more promptly are already reporting positive year over year, but note that is after 3 years of declining rates of a much lower base. But we're seeing many countries, Mexico included, that are having positive transaction and positive volumes, which is a great sign. Obviously, that helps the players that are in the industry today. We continue to have pressures on pricing, and that I expect will continue to some extent. and we're reaching levels that are comparable to credit cards. So, you read a lot about very high rates and very high margins. I don't know where, not in the U.S. or Latin America. So we're very competitive and already provide a very good service, what I think is a very fair price, but that will continue. The bottom line when you go through all of this is consolidation is already here. I had, unrelated to this conference, 2 people asked me in the last week, they said, when is this consolidation going to happen? And I looked at them and I said, well, I think it has been happening. And as you will see in some of these next slides, I think I'll show you that. Why is it happening? What are the drivers? In this last 5 years or so, size and scale is not just nice, it's necessary. If you don't have size and scale, at least I don't know how to create shareholder value in the short term. You can get operational efficiencies in everything you touch, from your banking fees to the way you deal with vendors, et cetera, and size and scale give you that. Geographical diversification is also key. And just this past month of September, as you guys know, the euro went down significantly, the dollar went up against some of the Latin countries, and we saw a huge 2-3 week splurge in the peso. That means there are a lot of people watching that, which is amazing, and they see a spike and they send a lot more. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is our business in Spain had a similar and reverse effect. And that's happening to a lot of people in Spain. So having the diversification is key. Regulatory requirements and related costs continue to increase. Every time we have an audit, which are very often, new things come up that were not requirements last year. It is one of the most inefficient processes that I've ever been associated with. It's like banking used to be 20 years ago, with all the states regulating and everybody has their own set of rules. We really need national regulatory body, and this is off topic, but I'm sorry. This is one of my pet peeves in the business. I would rather do quarterly audits and do an audit every quarter and share with every regulator. I would rather pick the hardest regulator and take all their criteria and use that. So I'm willing to submit myself to a quarterly audit, share with the world. Today, what happens is you have everybody auditing you every couple of years, and they're all about the same and they're all different, and the rules are constantly changing. So you have an incredible cost to keep this going, which really is not really helping anyone, and it's not making the company any more compliant. So I'll move off of that. Capital requirements, they're going to continue to increase, in part because of regulation, in part because everyone, including your banking partners, wants you to have a larger tangible net worth, more permissible investments, more cash, and some of the rules associated with that are also illogical, but that's another issue. Banking, as you guys in the industry know, this has been a problem for 15 years. I think it's leveled off. There's some large banks that are interested in the business and working well in the industry, but many other banks still today do not want to bank an MSB, which is a highly regulated and highly audited business. So all of that, including management, is sort of the drivers for the consolidation that we've experienced. So what I did, I went back and I looked at 17 different transactions. I've eliminated the names to sort of protect the innocent. And I will say this, these are actual transactions. On the left vertical axis, you will see EBITDA multiples. So it gives you a sense for valuation of transactions. In the horizontal axis on the bottom, you will see a timetable. So basically it starts in 1997 and it ends this year. So if you look at this, the story and what you see here, Western Union bought Orlandi Valuta back in 1996, 1997. That's the first one. Dolex brought in a private equity group, Advent, in 2000, and we bought Vigo in 2003. Those are the first three. Then you have a period of about 2 or 3 years where there was a lot of companies that were sold. This was primarily done by one individual and one group. It was not done in a way that you would expect. Some of the things we're going to talk about later in the presentation will show that. And basically, it was a complete disaster. And I'll tell you that most M&A does not work. So the caution point is you need to know what you're doing. You need to have good advisors. You need to be very diligent, or you can really have a completely opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve. The second highest valuation sale was us. We sold Vigo in 2005. And the highest point that you see in 2006 was RIA. After RIA, you see a precipitous decline in the valuations of other transactions. I'm happy, well, I guess I'm unhappy to tell you, one of those was mine. I bought RQI in 2008, and it was absolutely at the wrong time, right before the crash. We had a great first year. We did a lot of good things. But basically, you know, we had an asset that we needed to do something with. We were fortunate and lucky to be able to buy Dolex, which is significantly larger, Dolex and Eurofil, and that occurred in 2010. So I'm one of the ones also near the bottom again, which is what you want to do. So what does the future look like? I think we're going to continue to see consolidation. I think you're going to continue to see transactions. I think it's not going to be a hockey stick. I think it's going to be a gradual growth, positive growth over the next several years, very much tracking current valuations in the market. Western Union, MoneyGram, and Euronet today are trading around 6 times EBITDA. So that's if they trade at those levels, this is going to stay somewhat depressed for a period of time. But I think consolidation will continue.